Welcome to Maritime Punk. My name's Jeff Boudreau, and today I'm speaking with Paul Gott from the Ripcordz. Formed in Montreal in the 1980s, they've released 15 full-length albums and continue to tour the country extensively. Thanks so much for doing this.
Hey, happy to be here.
So take me back to your earliest memories of punk rock back in Montreal. What was the scene like back then?
Um, Scene was weird. Well, I guess all scenes were weird back around like 79, 80. We were all looking to sort of try and find out what the hell was going on because we didn't really know. I know I was, none of my friends were into punk back in the day. So it was me going to local record stores, used record stores, and basically going through the bins and trying to find anything that had a punk rock looking cover, and trying to sort of pick stuff up and bring stuff home and, pay $5 for an album, bring stuff home. And it either would be, yay, I've got something good, or, oh my God, who's this Madonna person? I shouldn't have bought this. And then sell it back the next day and get $3 out of my 5 back and try again.
Mhm.
So, and when it came to live shows, there was very few. I mean, the few that were around were great. Vibrators came to town. Um, there were all sorts of different shows, and we were starting to pick up on local shows. But it was a hard slog at the time. No social media, no
Mhm.
zines, no nothing really out there. So it was just you were on your own trying to figure out what was going on. And so we all kind of ended up, I think, heading in other directions until the early 80s anyway.
Yeah, I think there was something magical about finding a band you liked back then. There wasn't an influx of information hitting you from all ends of check out this band, check out this band. It's the background song in a TikTok video. You really had to look for it. And when you found a band you liked, you were like, holy shit, I found one.
Well, it was great. It was great doing that because it was like sometimes you'd make a discovery and nobody else in town had knew about this. I did that with the Undertones. Picked up one of their albums actually when I was on vacation in the States with my family. We went to Maine, and at Portsmouth, Maine, there was like this mall that was just like selling all its albums for like 99 cents. So I bought a crap load of albums, and one of them was the Undertones' first album, and it was just like, oh my God, like I bought this for 99 cents. It's friggin' amazing. And then you get to sort of share that with all your friends, which was, just kind of amazing sort of, and so it not only felt good for you, but you became like a source for other people. And, we'd hear stuff in clubs. There was this one song I kept on hearing in clubs, and I would always go to the DJ, and they were always too busy to talk, and I could never figure out what the hell the song was. So I kept on buying these albums, hoping I'd find this song by this female punk band that had no idea, or punk new wave. And then one day I was playing an album at home, and it was like, oh my God, that's the song. And it was the second song on side 2, and it was 999. It was a guy singing, but when I heard it in the clubs, I thought it was a girl. So I was like, had no clue, but it was like, oh my God, I finally found this. And it was just like such a great discovery, and just loved finding stuff like that.
Now you've gotten through your fair share of lineup changes over the years. What are some challenges that bands face with in regards to keeping consistent lineups? Just speaking on your personal experiences.
Well, it's kind of difficult if you're still writing new songs. If it's older songs, not so bad. People can learn them. But for instance, even in the last couple of years, we've had, I think, 8 lineups in the last 2 years. And that's mainly because we're now the Ripcordz collective. We all have jobs, so we get really busy, and we're still playing 40 plus shows a year. So sometimes like, okay, bass player can't make it, so old bass players or jumps in, and we're actually playing one last show after this tour. We're going to do one show sort of just before New Year's, and it's going to be a lineup we've never actually done before, but with Gopal, who is our drummer on the last album, and with Danny, who is one of our first bass players, went on our first big cross Canada tours with us in 92, 93, came back in like the early 2010s, and has been sort of replacing on a regular basis ever since. And they're great people, and it's kind of nice that we have that we are still friends with all our ex members, so we could keep on playing these shows. What we aim to do is sort of take the time over Christmas and New Year and sort of into the spring to sort of really sort of record with our newest lineup. And so that we can sort of really practice and then record some songs and put out a new album that might be played by any combination of folks. But it's one of those things. You're a punk rock band. You don't make money. It's kind of the definition. So life gets in the way. People get jobs. People have families. People, it's not like they move on from punk rock, but it's just like, okay, I can't go out on tour because my kid's in high school and I need to pick them up from school every day.
Yeah.
Or I've got a job and I can get a week here or there, but I can't do that big month-long tour anymore. So even this coming summer, where I got this crazy plan. I'm going to do a cross Canada trip with my kid, my son, who's never seen Canada, and then we're going to straight hit Vancouver, where we're going to meet up with one of our ex bass players who lives in Victoria now. And so he's going to do a tour with us, and our current drummer, who lives in Kingston, is going to fly out to Vancouver, meet us there. We're going to do the tour back all the way out east, back to Montreal, and then our bass player, am I getting this right? Yeah, our bass player is going to fly back to his home in Victoria. Okay. So kind of crazy plan, but it should work. And we've had some great shows with that specific lineup. So it all kind of works out in the end. But yeah, it does get more complicated. It was kind of easier back in the 80s and the 90s, where it's like, let's go out and get a show. Play a show. Let's go out on tour. I was like, well, I got to lose my job. Well, I don't care. Okay, let's go.
Yeah.
Life was easier back then.
Yeah. Kind of reminds me of that internet meme where this guy's a professor with all the lines on the board and the post-its and the formulas. Like, that's pretty much what it takes nowadays to make it happen.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I'm going to do at the end of this year, one thing I noticed having this up on screen is I touch my face a lot. Maybe just, I don't know what it is. Anyway, but one thing I'm going to do at the end of the year is I'm actually going to put up a map of Canada and sort of put all the different dates, with like color code them, so you can see how absolutely insane we were this year for putting shows together. Like, we actually played Winnipeg and Thunder Bay, which are 7 hours away from each other, 6.5 hours away from each other. But we did Winnipeg as part of this huge loop of the prairies and had to fly out to Alberta to start that one. And then we played Thunder Bay by driving there about a month later from Montreal. And it just, a normal tour would have just gone Winnipeg, Thunder Bay. That's it's an easy drive. It's like a 6.5 hour drive. So, but not the way we did it this year. We did things completely insane.
Yeah. So let's talk about your day job. When you weren't ripping it up on stage, you have many years working in journalism, media, TV. Did you always have that sort of creative passion? And what was your journey that led you to where you are now?
Well, I always kind of wanted to be a writer, but I figured if I went to university that I should actually do something where you could get a job. So I sort of did the closest thing to writing, which was journalism. And then they kind of, got involved with like stuff on campus and the Students Association. And they said, oh, well, you're a journalism student. You should actually do our newsletter and do the handbook and for the university and stuff like that. I said, sure. Who's going to like design that stuff? And they said, well, you are. So all of a sudden I was in print media by default. I was like not only writing and sort of got a lot of stuff done through the university, but then I learned how to do design work. So I started in print and I was like publishing magazines. And I published Rearguard magazine actually on the side back then, which was what I called my fanzine on steroids, which was a 36-page monthly tabloid with like where I got to interview the Ramones, and we interviewed Metallica, and we gave them the equal space with local bands. The way it always worked was whichever band had the best photo got on the cover. So when Metallica was interviewed, they weren't on the cover because we had a better better photo, I think, of the asexuals that issue. So they ended up on the cover. So anyway, so I got involved in journalism that way, and then from there I kind of moved to television and radio. I managed a radio station at Concordia for years. So then moved on from radio to television, and ended up producing the local news for 20 years between CTV, CBC, and Global, and that was interesting. It was interesting. Well, for one thing, I got to go in as me because that was my negotiation uh, on all jobs has always been no dress code. I didn't negotiate salary. I didn't negotiate vacation. I didn't negotiate anything. I just said no dress code. So I got to be me,
Yep.
and kind of tried to produce as much like me as possible. So it was fun. We were actually going back and forth a little bit before the interview, and I was mentioning that we were following like the student strikes that were happening in Montreal for a year, and we'd be like following these, and we'd have all these other demonstrations. And the funny thing was, most of the demonstrations in Montreal were being put on by friends of mine, and I'd know them, and yet we'd have a camera crew out there, and I'd be like phoning the person who was like running this protest and kind of going, could you not surround our, and throw things at
Yeah, yeah.
our camera crew? And like, look, we got to do it. You're all, and I'm like, look, we're not the same. That I'm going to try and talk to people and sort of treat you fairly.
Mhm.
But that usually didn't work, but at least it kept anybody from getting injured. But I don't think it didn't really change that much, but it's kind of fun seeing both sides of something that's going on out there.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of where I wanted to go next. I wanted to ask you, have there been times when you felt that your song lyrics may pose a conflict of interest with your job as a producer and journalist?
Well, all the songs, all the anti-media songs I wrote for the Ripcords were done when I was with the media. So irony there, I guess. But at the same time, it's sort of you see what's going on, and while I could obviously influence what was going on in my newsroom, I couldn't influence everything that was going on across the city. So it was. It was. I wouldn't even say it's challenging. I just. I guess I kind of run the Ripcords the way I run my jobs or what I do at work.
Mhm.
Is I just like, okay, this is me. I'm being honest. This is how I feel. We're going to run with this. Now, in the newsroom, you have to negotiate with a lot of people, and even if you're the producer, you still have to make sure that the reporters are on board, and you have bosses, but you don't kowtow to the bosses, but you do sort of, okay, well, they say, well, you shouldn't be doing this. I go, well, we should be doing this, but I tell you what, we'll make sure that we've got these two sides to this issue, and to me, good journalism would only show that my friends are better anyway. So I'm not really that worried about it.
So news often is centered around tragedy, tough times, violence, oppression. So being surrounded by world and local news daily, did that kind of inspire certain Ripcord songs? Or was that something you were always kind of keeping an eye on?
Well, I think it's something kind of keep an eye on anyway. I mean, certainly, I think the one thing that the news has done, and I still do it, I pay a lot of attention to what's going on. There's new media out there too, which is, always interesting. Most of the new media, I kind of, it's nice to have sort of editorials and long stories afterwards. But to me, it's still, if you want to find out what the hell is going on, you've got to look at the mainstream media because they'll have it first. Um, and they'll have a bigger variety of stuff. So I still pay a lot of attention to what's going on, and I think it's reflected in our songs. At first, I would always go, yeah, well, lyrics, and even first album, there's a lot of stuff about girls. Evidently, I liked girls a lot back then. Still do, even if they've turned into women, still like them too. But it's just I think now I'm quite proud of my lyrics, and that I think they if you take them on the surface, they can be a lot of fun, but if you really look at what I'm writing, there's a lot of depth to it, and so I'm not one of those you have to study my lyrics if you're going to like the band,
Yeah.
but
Look
I'm
for the
actually
hidden messages.
Yeah, if you want to take stuff on the surface, that's great. But if you want to dig a little deeper, there's a little bit more there too, which I find is kind of nice.
Yeah. So one thing that I've really been enjoying are your tour tips you've been sharing on social media, and I feel like it kind of ended up getting a life of its own. Did you anticipate it would have this much traction, or was it just something you were doing
No,
to just
it,
maybe help out some buds that were in bands starting out? And
yeah, it actually started out as a joke. I found this old photo of where we were actually staying at a place in Alberta. Oh, we were staying in Humboldt, um, and with a friend. So that's sorry, Saskatchewan. And anyway, the kids had one of those big wheel sort of type toys because it was a family we were staying with. And then we were out on the sidewalk, and so our drummer's on the big wheel, and I'm pretending that I'm getting run down by this thing. And so then I just thought that was a really funny
yeah.
photo. And then so I just put it in the frame saying tour tip number 72, never let the drummer drive. Um, and put that up, and then people actually were taking that seriously and sort of giving feedback on whether drummers are good drivers or not. And I was like, okay, this is not quite but it had such a lot of traction. I just went I think it was the next day, I just went, okay, I tell you what, that wasn't true, but here's a tour tip for you. And I started putting them up with random numbers, and thinking I'd maybe make it to 10. And right now I'm at 251. Um, and it sort of, it got me looking through our old tour albums, and I was like, looking at pictures and going, oh yeah, stage diving. You've got to be careful because you can hit the floor, and then that your tour is over. And what happens when the cops do this, and what's the worst hill in Canada if you're in a van? Like, what's the biggest test? How do you promote your show properly? And all these little things that we just do naturally now, um, is, and it's kind of funny because there's tons of stuff we do naturally. And then it's like, oh, wait a second. There's a reason behind that. That could be a tour tip. So I went to 250 of them and sort of finished that up about a week or so ago. And said, that's probably it. Maybe once or twice, if there's anything else that hits me. So I've already had one that's hit me, and so we're now up to 251, and I already have another one in my head. It looks like they'll keep going, just not quite as quickly as before. Everybody wants me to publish um, uh, a coffee table book,
Yeah.
and which would be a lot of fun. But yeah, I'd have to find a publisher and stuff. Everything's more complicated than it seems. So I'm kind of like, maybe we'll see. If a publisher just sort of phones me up and says, "Hey, I'm going to publish your book," I go, "Okay, we'll deal." But as for me looking for that, I got too many irons in the fire as it is.
Being a punk rocker from the early days, late 70s, early 80s, I feel like there's a lot of those fans who have a hard time adjusting and realizing that it's a different world now, and they're gatekeepers, I guess you could say. And I see them on Facebook pages all the time commenting, "That's not punk, blah blah blah. You should be spray painting anarchy symbols in the bathrooms and spitting on the band." But I feel like some of those changes that have happened throughout the years have been positive things, where you can still be punk, have your message heard, scream those lyrics out on stage, but not trash a venue so you can go back and play again. Did you deal with a lot of people that are on your page saying like, "Oh, that's not punk, you're a sellout, blah blah blah"?
Yeah, that's. I mean, there's some things that. I mean, for one thing, yeah, it's a new generation. Deal with it. Like I say that all the time. It's like, you may be like, a punk was not better in the 80s. Fuck you, old guy. There were some great bands in the 80s. There were very few shows. It was hard to find music. Um, there's way more bands out there now. There's way more venues. Um, there's way more bands touring. And now it's like, okay, we got the best of the old guys because nobody ever gets a job in punk rock. GBH just rolled through. We have all these other bands that are still playing. If you want to see them, you can. But to be truthful, why bother? There are bands that are actually active and doing stuff. And I'd include things like, older bands like the Dayglow Abortions, who keep on putting out albums, and we keep on putting out albums because we don't want to turn into our own cover band. And yeah, it's a new world out there. And the new generation, they got their own values and their own things of what is punk and what is, it's really funny because we always used to say, okay, we're anarchists and we're doing this and we're doing that and we're going to be doing this. And a lot of times it was kind of suburban kids saying that. And now that some of the kids are out there kind of agreeing with it and kind of saying, yeah, we're forming our own society where, even where there's sexual identity, where we're going to be, where sexual identity is really up to whoever is that person, or that we're going to be politically correct, but in a punk rock sort of way. But there is now politics that permeates the scene, and that's okay. That's what we said we were supposedly fighting. Anarchy wasn't just so you could burn things down; it's so you could build a better world out of it. And now it's sort of like, now that people are saying, okay, well, you have to be politically correct. You can't just, like insult segments of society and sort of get away with it anymore. That's a good thing. Like, and I do see the old punk rockers going, no, you can't do anything like that. And I was like, fuck you. Like you're old, you burnt out. You might as well be sitting around a fire, singing Kumbaya, with a distorted guitar, because that's done.
Yeah.
It was fun while we had it. And I'm actually kind of glad we moved on from it.
So this is Maritime Punk, and I want to talk East Coast. You've been touring the country for decades. I'm sure you've played the East Coast many times, and just wondering what some of your memories are from playing the Maritime provinces.
There seemed to be a lot of beer out there for some reason. I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, it was funny because we played there, quite regularly in the 90s and into the I'm not entirely sure when we stopped playing, but at some point in time we stopped playing because it's just so far to get there.
Sure.
And then we sort of came back in, like, I think it was 2015. So it was our first time sort of trying back there. And it was like, I remember actually telling the crowd in Halifax, I said, hey, if we'd known you'd moved closer, we would have come out more often. And everybody looked at me as if I was stupid. But it was just like, there's that highway in New Brunswick, and it cuts out like 4 hours of time. Like, it used to be like, to get through New Brunswick, you were like going along little riverbeds and going over this tiny little bridge and then going back. And now it's just like one friggin' super highway, which is a little boring, but hell, it makes it so much easier. It makes it possible for us to go out there. This year's, excursions to the Maritimes included one where we just hit Fredericton and then came home. And then, we got this other one where we're doing St. John, Halifax, Charlottetown in 3 days. And, basically I work on Thursday, we hop in the car Friday, we make it to St. John, Halifax the next day. We're taking the ferry, by the way. It's expensive, but hell, it's a ferry. And then we're doing Halifax the next day, driving to Charlottetown the next day, doing another ferry on that one, and then driving home and working on a Tuesday. So that's something. So we're basically doing it and getting back home in 4 days. We're doing 3 shows in 3 provinces and making it back home so we can all go back to work again.
Nice.
So it's it's possible now, and I love that. I love it because we always had great shows there. Yeah. We always had fun shows. We played Hampton, and we played Sunnyside. Was Sunnyside second largest town in
Charlottetown?
Summerside.
Yeah,
I think it was the Buffy the Vampire Slayer thing, because they were in Sunnydale, so it's always got that. Right. Always screwed me up. But Summerside, yeah. So we played Summerside, Hampton, and like all these other places as well. And if we could find more places, we were hoping to do it this year, but we're hoping that next year we can actually spend a week just traipsing around and finding different towns that we haven't played. And we know there's 1 or 2 places, and And for sure, if we could spend a week, it just means we're not going to be playing on Friday or Saturday nights in some towns, and sometimes that doesn't work. So we're heavily into negotiations, and anybody who's watching this, contact me through our Facebook page, and we'd be happy to sort of negotiate and play as cheaply as possible. If the more shows we can put together on a tour, the cheaper it is for us to play.
Exactly. Love it. So, are there any plans to retire the Ripcordz, or are you going to keep playing as long as you can hold a guitar and scream into a mic?
Yeah, it's funny considering that I thought I was too old to form a band when I formed the band, and that was 43 years ago, going on 44. So you know what? It's still fun. It's still, if I hadn't been in the Ripcordz, I wouldn't have seen most of Canada. I would have met so many people. It's still a ton of fun, and we still get, there's a couple of things I've got as my own benchmarks. One, if everybody who starts coming to our shows is my age, I'd stop playing. Like, we need the younger generation for the energy, for the input, for the ideas, and for the fun. People my age are boring. So not all of them, I guess. The ones that come to our shows, I guess they're in the top 5%. But
shout out to all the boring old dudes.
Yeah, like me. Cheers. And the other one is if ever we stop writing our own stuff, if I stop writing songs and we're not able to sort of come up with new stuff, I'd also stop playing. Like, I don't want to turn into our own cover band. So, but right now, still fun, still meeting people, still meeting new bands. I mean, I think I'm wearing this wasn't planned, but I'm wearing my Old Habits shirt. So Maritime Pride going on there. And played with them a couple of times. Great bunch of guys. Really cool band. They're actually on the upcoming Punk Canada comp that we're putting together. Okay. Maritimes represent Halifax, Moncton, and we're actually even starting to work on number 4, and I guess by we I mean me, but starting to work on the 4th compilation as well, and getting some. We already have Willful Disobedience is in on that one, so and we're looking for more. So any Maritimes bands out there, or active Maritimes bands who want to be in on the Punk Canada comps, there's one band per city, but we still have openings for number 4. So please feel free.
So that was Paul Gott with the Ripcordz. I'm sure they'll be in your city or town at some point, and let's bring the younger fellas out to these shows to introduce them to a band that's been around forever, and they still keep pumping out the music.